if it hasn't been mentioned by now, Silent Hill 2 is my favorite game of all time. Well, it's usually a tie between Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. I mean, Silent Hill 1's pretty good, so I like them all. And then, of course, Silent Hill 4 is kind of like your redheaded stepchild of the series, of the original series, I guess. And I have always hated these games, despite the fact that I still have them. The reason I still have them is for the same exact reason I still have these, which I went on a 2-hour rant about how much I hate these movies. This one in particular. Can't blame this one for what this one did to the series. This just had to work with what it had, so can't blame the second one without blaming the first. As an old Silent Hill fan, collecting was a thing that we used to do. Aside from my video games, my main thing that I collected were my statues. In this case, the resin models that I made and assembled. Hence the B-roll in this video, I'll be yet again painting another statue. And my topic for this video, while I work, I'll be talking about my thoughts on the upcoming remake of Silent Hill 2 by Bloober Team. You know, while on the subject of collecting, that does make me wonder. Silent Hill fans are usually well known for being obsessive collectors of all things Silent Hill. And Konami knows this, which is why they had to include so much random merch during the Silent Hill transmission back in 22. But with this new market in games, where everything is pretty much digital, what does that mean when it comes to getting these new games? Especially for those of us that like to collect. Silent Hill Ascension is a live stream let's play of a game that we can't own or play. And I haven't even bought a physical game in like at least 5 years. At this point, I don't even know if physical copies come with a disc anymore. Hell, we have consoles now that don't even have disc drives in them at this point. And I know, especially as a PC gamer, that loading a game on an SSD is the way to go. But I would love to have a physical copy of Silent Hill 2 Remake, just to go along with my collection. But that also means that in 10 to 15 years, I might not be able to play that game again, because by then we'll be on the PS7 and they'll be shutting down support for the PS5 and you can no longer access your digital games. And sure, there'll probably be an HD remaster for that game by then, but considering the game is good and we actually still want to play it by then, knowing Konami, I'm expecting it to be handled the same way as the last HD collection. But back on the subject of these statues, I've only ever bought one official statue, and that was when Gecko started releasing their collection. They originally promised us hobbyists that they would also sell kits of their statues if demand was high enough, but as far as I'm aware, they never went through with that. And at this point, Konami is releasing so many new Silent Hill statues that I can't even keep up with what's been released. Maybe I'm just getting old, or maybe I just don't care anymore. Most likely it's just that I prefer the model kits than the already finished statues. Not to mention, it's mostly just variations of Pyramid Head after Pyramid Head when it comes to these new statues. I want something else. I did kind of like the newest one that they put out with Pyramid Head attacking James and the monsters all around the base. The base itself is very reminiscent of Ito's artwork in the booklet for Silent Hill Origins soundtrack. But the monsters don't represent their originals that well. For example, the Flesh Lips is squished vertically, and the Abstract Daddy is just way too phallic. Like, yeah, the giant penis is technically there, but the in-game model, the human head is both higher up and further forward, making that giant thing harder to notice. Subtlety. It was an explicit creature, but those details were subtle. Not to mention, they painted that thing bright pink, like it was a freshly shaven dick. Okay, I'm all warmed up now. Let's talk about the Silent Hill 2 Remake. Now, I know and appreciate the fact that Masahiro Ito is back, I love his artwork in general, and it's inspired my own since the original games came out. But my concerns with these updated monsters parallels with why modern movie monsters in general don't always work for me. And it's something I don't think a lot of modern horror game developers understand. The biggest horror is in our own imagination, and what you can't see, what's obscured, will always look a lot scarier than the creature that's standing out in broad daylight. Old horror movies, especially from the 70s and 80s, have this distinct look and feel to them. The film quality's dark, grainy, and blurry at times. This low-tech imagery helped contribute to the horror. It helps obscure the monster. It brings your imagination forward, makes you question what you're seeing. I'm by no means saying that modern horror films don't understand this or can't achieve this. They have. But to me at least, most of them are too clean and clear in their cinematography to really obscure their horror. And this problem is even more so in video games. In the original Silent Hill games, especially in 2 and 3, if you look at the monsters, you'll notice a lot of dark splotches baked into their textures. When these creatures are then set in a dark hallway, only visible from a flashlight, it enhances that contrast, helping to obscure the monster's details, making it harder to make out what exactly you're looking at. Your imagination fills in the blanks, and there's nothing scarier than your own imagination. From the trailer we've seen, and the artwork that's been posted, those splotches seem gone and everything is clean and clear. When Pyramid Head walks through that door out of the rain, we can see every detail. We can make out what kind of materials his helmet's made of. We're no longer wondering, what is that? But rather, oh, it's just a man in a helmet. There's nothing left to wonder. You can see it all. Now, I know it's probably impossible to add those kinds of obscuring details in a modern game without it looking kind of weird. The high definition that modern games have, it's not very forgiving when it comes to intentionally obscuring details. So I'm not 100% blaming Bloober Team for this here. I think to get that same exact effect in a modern 4K world is a huge challenge. Side note, it would be cool if they added those random blurs from the original Art of Silent Hill music videos. That could be a cool way to go. But just like the 70s and 80s horror films, back in the PS2 days, you had a lot of old tech to help you out. Not only was the resolution so low, around like 480, but that natural grainy upscaling of a CRT TV really helps sell that horror. Now, I know Masahiro Ito is involved with this game, and if I was a smooth brain, I'd be ecstatic about that news. But I know for a fact he's not the art director, which makes sense. Bloober Team has their own people, and they're not going to knock down their own guys to put in place someone that they don't know or trust. The most I can find is that Ito is just the monster designer and probably doing some consulting, which means that the art director of the game still has the final say in how things look. So while I love Ito's art and design, it's not guaranteed that we're going to see that in the final product. I guess I just worry about the cleanliness of the image. In their pursuit of showing us all the fancy new details, will they accidentally show us too much and leave nothing to our imagination? This brings me to another thought as well. They mentioned in the Silent Hill transmission video that they needed to modernize the game's mechanics to meet the expectations of modern gamers. And I completely agree with this. Silent Hill 2's controls were a huge jump from Silent Hill 1. But don't forget, Silent Hill Homecoming, its controls and combat was abysmal for a reason. Bloober Team said that for this reason, and to make the game more immersive, they chose an over-the-shoulder camera. And I have problems with this. Over-the-shoulder cameras work great in a lot of games, mostly action. But let's consider something about Silent Hill 2's original design. Silent Hill 2's level design was insanely claustrophobic. If James were to reach his arms out in some of these hallways, he could probably reach both walls. These were some cramped environments, and it worked well visually, especially when you would see a monster in a hallway, because the only way to progress was forward, and there was no getting around that thing that you can't even fully make out what it is. But it's in your way, and its uncanny valley is sending off alarms of fear in your head, but you need to progress, and you need to march forward. Now, this did cause problems for Silent Hill 2 though. If you watched enough streamers and Let's Players, they all had the same exact problem with the game, and that was the camera. These hallways were so tight that when you entered a room, there wasn't enough room for your camera to fit behind James. So it started out in front of him, looking at James. This helped with the horror a little bit, because now you don't know what's in front of James. You have to step into the unknown. But that said, all of those same streamers had no idea what the L2 button did, and would proceed to walk into the camera for like at least half the game. Like, guys, seriously, just hold the L2 and walk forward. This button forces the camera behind James. Like, I swear, like, modern gamers are just so lazy. If there's no prompt on screen telling people what to do, they play like morons for like the next 8 hours. Like, oh god, don't tell me we're gonna have quest markers in this game too. Because it's not like manuals are a thing anymore. So that means that this game is going to have an opening tutorial level with on-screen prompts. Like, could I be the one to say that stuff like achievement notifications and on-screen prompts and control reminders are all immersion breaking? It's fine for most games, but good horror games don't have a HUD for a reason. They want you to be immersed. Throwing up a reminder every 30 seconds that you're playing a game, it takes you out of the horror. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that this is how the game's going to be, but I can see it happening. But to stay on topic, how does this new over-the-shoulder camera affect the game? Both overhead and over-the-shoulder cameras have their limitations. And with interior levels, well, from what we've seen in the trailer, their solution to this seems to be just to widen the hallways. I hope I'm wrong, and I'm just seeing it wrong, because I really want that claustrophobia in Silent Hill 2 Remake. Those tight rooms and halls help make those rooms feel real, because that's how most places are structured. Video games have this tendency to make the environments bigger, to give the player more room to move, to give the camera more space. This is kind of what set apart the original Silent Hill games from other games at that time. Most of the games back then, everything was insanely big. Doors were twice as big, ceilings were twice as high, rooms were twice as big, everything was really, really big. But Silent Hill's levels were almost accurate. They were realistic in comparison. And an over-the-shoulder camera is only going to require a bigger space, which would result in less realistic interior designs. I mean, that said, maybe they'll be smart, and in those specific environments, they'll switch back to an overhead camera. They could even use it to signify the type of environment that the player is in, and use it against the player later on, like some kind of Pavlovian tool to toy with a player when things get real crazy in a labyrinth. But asking for creative game design in this day and age is probably asking too much. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind changes in the game, but only if it can help tell a better story. Something like moving the door in the restroom at the beginning of the game doesn't bother me. If they want to shoot that scene differently, it's not going to hurt anything. This game is most likely going to have a lot more cutscenes, so moving some stuff around might help better, especially if it's going to tell a better story visually. Alright, so my plan with the base on this one is, in terms of like my most fondest memories with the slurpers themselves, I think probably the first major place we really start seeing them is in the Hilltop Center. And the Hilltop Center in Silent Hill 3 has like a very distinct grading in the Otherworld, and I want to try and recreate that because all my other bases are like tile and like regular grading. So I thought this would be kind of cool to try and achieve. It's a little difficult to do though, so I'm crossing my fingers I can actually do this. If not, I mean, it's just a base, and it's not like anyone's really gonna see this except for you, I guess. Speaking of story, let's cover that next. There have been some talks about minor changes being made, such as them aging James and Mary up a bit. I believe one of the reasons stated for this is because we, the player ourselves, are now older, and that they wanted to make it so that he had suffered more in life before the events of the game. I'm not totally opposed to this idea. As someone who's in their late 30s, even playing Silent Hill 2 today, I have a hard time seeing James as someone younger than me, especially when I compare him to people I know who are his age today. Times are different now, and even though times were very different when this game took place, I can see people having a hard time today believing that this character is supposed to be in his late 20s. This was kind of a common thing back in the PS1 and PS2 era anyway. How many RPGs did we play where the main character was a teenager? They were designed that way because we, the audience, were teens and kids when those games came out. And today, if we look back at some of those characters, the ages don't always feel right. Sid from Final Fantasy VII is supposed to be 32. It's impossible. He feels like he should be in his 40s. If we compare his life story to real life, it makes more sense for a failed astronaut like Sid to now be in his late 40s when his story takes place. His crushed dreams and lost time in a project that got shut down and never fulfilled, and his redemption arc, and being able to fly his rocket to save the planet, it makes a lot more sense if he's much older than 32. Being at 32, he still has a lot of years ahead of him to pursue his dreams still. His regrets and depression and the time lost on a failed mission makes all the more sense the more you age him up. And in the case of James and Mary in Silent Hill 2, I can definitely understand aging them up 100%. But this can also affect who James is as a character, which is why we have the whole Sad James controversy. This controversy came from the very over-expressive James in the remake trailer. I might just be optimistic, but to me, that trailer, which was pretty much all cutscenes, was their way of showing off how much detail they'll be able to show. In this case, the expressions. I mean, I'm probably wrong, but at the same time, these cutscenes aren't final either, and I'm sure Bloober Team is listening. So maybe those aspects will be toned down a bit in the final product. I do agree that he is way too expressive in those scenes, and I get that not only is modern mocap far more advanced than what was used in Silent Hill 2, but they now have professional actors this time around too, so I understand them wanting to utilize that to its fullest extent. It does remind me of that clip of Troy Baker talking about his opening scene in The Last of Us, where he went all out and was super proud of himself, but got called in the next day by the director who told him they need to do another take and that they wanted him to tone it down this time. Troy had hammed it up a bit too much in the original take, and it wasn't the tone the director wanted, and the more quiet second take was the one we got at the end. This is just my long-winded way of saying that these scenes aren't final, and that the director can and probably will change them before we see the final product. That said, I fully side with the crowd that thinks he's too expressive, and I know the rebuttal to this is that the original game's tech didn't allow for expressive characters, which is a lie. Just watch the Maria scene in the prison cell. That alone is all the proof you need. They could make those characters expressive and natural when they wanted to. Now, James is a blank slate for a very specific reason. Not only do your actions in-game dictate the game's ending, but the endings in Silent Hill 2 are what defines James' entire existence. His reason for coming, why he acts the way he does to other people, his reasons for doing what he did to Mary, and his whole state of mind throughout the whole game. In more simpler terms, each ending is a completely different character. One is selfish, one is depressed and detached, another is full of sorrow and seeking redemption. James also comes to town with a partially blank memory, almost to symbolize those character paths, or at the very least to help facilitate them. He wasn't blank because of the game's tech, he was cold and detached. These kinds of people exist. They experience some bad stuff, and parts of their brain says, nope, I'm not dealing with this anymore, I'm shutting off. That's who James is as a person. But like I said, I do hope that Bloober Team is listening and understands, but at the very end of the day, this is still their game, and they're going to do what they want to do in the end. Which is why I want to circle back to something that I mentioned earlier. Yes, Masahiro Ito and Akira Yamaoka are both back, and they will have some creative input aside from their main roles. I'm sure Bloober Team is consulting them for information. But I need to stress this, and I wish people really understood this back when Akira was still attached to Homecoming and Origins. They were not the writers of the original games. When these Western games originally started coming out, people would say things like, Akira is still attached, then it's still Silent Hill. Or that Akira is Silent Hill. Yes, Akira and Ito both were heavily involved in the original games, and they had a lot of influence, and they worked closely with everyone else involved, but they are not Hiroyuki Owaku. He wrote the story, he wrote the themes, the symbolism. Yes, this was a collaborative process, but if we were to consider the main pillars of not just Silent Hill, but of Silent Hill 2 itself, it's Owaku, Ito, and Akira. The story, art, and sound. It's mind, body, and soul. Akira and Ito can provide a lot of insight for Bloober Team, but without Owaku, I do worry they will misinterpret a lot of information, just as fans have all these years. Made even worse since the release of Christoph Gans's film adaptation. How much headcanon and fan theories will be retconned in this remake? Are we going to see that ugly otherworld transformation from the movie that every game has had used since? Man, I hope not. Modern games today love their filler content to pad out the runtime. And while I am perfectly cool with this to an extent, because I love the way they went about it in Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it helped flesh out the world and side characters, I do worry about if it will ruin the tone and pacing of the game at the same time. I mean, are we going to get a bowling minigame in Pete's Bowl-O-Rama? Can you beat Maria's high score?
I hate bowling.
I didn't come here to play.
Will they throw in the old rumored secret pole dance as an Easter egg? Granted, that would be kind of funny if they added a mini quest for this that went nowhere, as a nod to people that kept trying to look for it for years and years. But on a less goofy note, are they going to overdo it when it comes to the side characters? Okay, I get to go on a quick rant now. As I said before, the Silent Hill Wiki is never to be trusted. A lot of its information for the games come from sources outside of those games. If half of its info isn't coming from a Western game that came out after, then it's coming from random crap that Konami puts their seal of approval on, and Konami will put their seal of approval on anything. For example, half of the town's lore on the wiki comes from the comics that were written by random Western comic book guys. How is this even considered canonical? In any other fandom, that would just be considered fanfiction at best. But on the Silent Hill Wiki, it's a part of the main lore now. In the case of Silent Hill 2, a lot of the information you see on the wiki doesn't come from the game, it comes from the Silent Hill 2 novelization. A book that was not written or endorsed or even helped by the original game's writer, Hiroyuki Owaku. And if you go to the book's page, they specifically state that the wiki quotes that book in every aspect of Silent Hill 2, as if it was 100% fact. In this novel, characters get way over-explained, and for the sake of edginess, extra trauma is added. In the case of Angela, in the game it's only mentioned that she's abused by her father. Information on the rest of her family is left vague. But in the novel, being abused by her father wasn't enough. They had to include her brother in on this as well. And then that still wasn't enough, so they had to throw in her getting abused at the workplace too. Like, I'm amazed they didn't throw the mom in as well on this. I really, really hope that Bloober Team ignores every single word written on the Silent Hill Wiki. That shit is not canonical, and it is unnecessary. That said, I don't mind extra content, just as long as it stays true to the characters and doesn't affect the tone and pacing. Which is why it's a shame that we don't have Hiroyuki Owaku attached to this too, because I would really love to explore these characters more in a canonical way. A character like Maria is a tragic character. She's a monster born from the town. All she knows is James. All she wants is James. He is her whole existence. She keeps coming back to life for him. She even tells James that she will be whatever he wants. But the town has her cursed to be afflicted with the same disease as Mary, to continuously die at the hands of Pyramid Head. And at the end of the game, when you confront her as the final boss, she reacts to James based on his choices. She can be angry at him for not choosing her, or she can be desperate to have him. I'm convinced that in the Maria ending, that she's pretending to be Mary just to put that final nail in the coffin so that James no longer wants her. But this is an interesting character, and I would love to know more. Not with how the town made her, but just her as a character. A character like Laura is very mysterious. Just within the game, we know very little about her. She came to Silent Hill because of a letter from Mary, And you find out in the hotel that she actually had 2 letters. One that we got to read, that she stole from her nurse, that was written by Mary to be given to Laura when Mary passed. And then there was the second letter, the letter that we never got to see, the one that she couldn't find when she went to show James. I 100% believe that her second letter wasn't real, just like James's letter. Because by the time this scene happens, James's letter had already disappeared. I believe the same thing happened with her second letter. This has always led me to believe that Laura was also called to the town. But why? She mentions to Eddie that she runs away a lot. Is it possible that her not seeing monsters at all is the town's way of showing her how she abandons people? This would be something I'd love to see expanded on. I mentioned this in my last video, that I noticed an odd elemental theme among our main characters in Silent Hill 2, especially in their portrayal of the otherworld. Eddie's world is cold and detached, just like him. Angela's world is on fire and full of rage, just like her. James's world is always wet. It either looks like it's been through a flood or is still flooded, just like James, drowning in his sorrow. The only 2 elements left I can think of would be wind and earth. Laura, flowing freely through the town without a care, makes me think that she would be the representation of wind. And for earth, maybe it could be the town itself, shifting and molding to our characters. Or maybe Maria is earth, considering she was born from it, born from the town of Silent Hill. I mean, these elemental themes are probably just a coincidence that I'm noticing, but it's still something I would love to see expanded on. But without Hiroyuki Owaku, we're either getting Bloober Team's version of these characters, or worse, we're getting the Silent Hill Wiki's version, which again is not an accurate source of information, not even close. And before anyone says, well, if the wiki's so wrong, why don't you just go and edit everything all right? I actually did. I used to, a long time ago. It's bad now, but it used to be a lot worse. I made a ton of random edits, most of which from the ones I remember seem to still be there. For example, one of my edits was on the siren. Before my edit, they had it written as being some kind of connection to World War II's air raid sirens, which made absolutely no sense. I personally spent almost my entire life just blocks away from a fire hall. I grew up next to one in an age without cell phones. The way they notified all the volunteer firefighters in the town was with an air raid siren. There was a car crash, a house fire, you name it. They would radio it in and then set off the air raid siren. And we would hear it for at least a good 5 minutes until all the volunteers showed up to the fire hall and got in the truck and went to the emergency. I personally live in the Northeast, where Silent Hill is supposed to take place. And my town can't be unique to this, because I know for a fact that all my neighboring towns have the same exact thing with their fire departments. The siren in Silent Hill is not a nod to World War II. It wasn't the movie's church blaring a siren to tell everyone to go to safety. It was the fire department, coming to put out the fire of Alessa's home. Understanding the sounds in Silent Hill is key, which is why I am glad that we have Akira back to help Bloober Team. I've been a fan of Akira forever. If it weren't for him, especially his music in Silent Hill 2, I probably never would have gotten into industrial music like I am today. My favorite track of his in Silent Hill 2 has always been The Reverse Will, mostly because of how unique it is. If you listen to it carefully, the entire track is recorded backwards. The only other song I've ever heard do this was Spinning Plates by Radiohead, and that song used vocals. Tom York had to learn and record all of his vocals in reverse, and then once recorded, they reversed the audio so that his words were heard normal, but with that reverse effect. You can also hear the same vocal effect in the Red Room in Twin Peaks as well. But the reason I'm mentioning vocals is because they said that Akira is going to be redoing and remixing the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack for this remake. And I'm sitting here crossing my fingers, begging and hoping that they do not get Mary Elizabeth McGlynn involved in this. There were no vocal tracks in Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2, and the addition of them in Silent Hill 3 was fitting. The musical tone in Silent Hill 3 was more modern to fit its protagonist Heather. tracks were a little more poppy, and vocal really helped bring out that teenage angst. But I think they really overdid it with her after that. Eventually, the Silent Hill community looked at Akira's music as Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. When people thought about how much praise the Silent Hill music got, they thought they were talking about the vocal tracks. But no, we were talking about songs like Tears of, The Reverse Will, Rain of Brass Petals, not the remix by Interlace, which is really good on its own, or say Nightmarish Waltz. Those are excellent songs. This game does not need those vocals. I haven't heard of her coming back. I just hope that we don't take any classic tracks and add vocals over top of it. Just please don't. That said, I do have complete faith in Akira in terms of remixing the music though. We can already hear it in the trailer, and it sounds more like the tracks are just being remixed to fit the scenes they're being used in, and that's cool. Alright, so I don't paint as much as I used to back in the day. Most of these brushes I have are leftovers from years and years ago. This brush here in particular, it's a bristle fan. This has kind of been my go-to for all of my models that I used to do back in the day. The bristles are fairly stiff, and it's also in a fan pattern. What this does is this lets me get things at a very straight angle. That way I can only touch the very top surfaces. That way the details of the model can stay intact and I don't constantly fill everything in. So, like I said in the last video, the way I'd work this, I would give everything a coat of black for the base, and then work my way up in layers to the top highest points, going with lighter and lighter colors in those certain tones. So, for example, this color is a lot of browns and pinks. This slurper. Well, let's backtrack a little bit for a second. There's a couple different versions of these in the game in Silent Hill 3, and they have some different color patterns. I know, like after a certain point too, I think after the hospital, they start getting like more bloody and stuff too, with that really cool like animated texture that they use in that game. I could gush about that entire technique they use, especially back in the PS2. It looks freaking phenomenal to this day. But anyway, I'm going off topic. So the version I'm going for, I believe, is the original version you first run into inside the Hilltop Center. So everything I'm going for here is kind of that entire scene. If I turn my camera just a little bit, you can see on my monitor, I have up my reference images. So to the left is a screenshot of the Hilltop Center with the graded floors and a little bit of tiles there right before the door. And then here is the actual like in-game model with the concept art with the matching colors and everything. So just in reference with the slurper, it's a lot of like browns and pinks. Slowly changes depending on, you know, the leather, the skin, and all that other kind of stuff. So what I'm doing is started with black, and then with a dark brown, then a light brown, and then after that, the colors are going to start to deviate away from that base. So the skin might start turning more pink, the clothes might start turning a little more like light brown. The pig face mask that he wears is going to start turning more like a tannish color. So really we're only looking at about 3 to 4 colors. Pig mask, skin, the clothes, and then the boots, I believe, are more of a darker brown. Might almost leave them where they're at, maybe add some kind of like a black wash to it or something. That said, I'm going to go into a quick little mini rant about these. So in the very, very first intro video I did for this, I just talked exclusively about my collection of these models and all that other stuff. I have a ton of them, but I don't have all of them. I could have bought all of them, and I would have if I did like the way they actually looked. A lot of them look terrible, like especially the character figure ones. Like there's like a Maria one and a James one, I believe, and they look bad. Like the actual like faces look terrible. And what I did go into though was that with each recast that gets made in the secondhand market of all these, you start losing detail more and more. What I didn't mention though was that sometimes in this secondhand market, they start losing pieces entirely. So there's pieces that end up getting completely resculpted. So I believe it's the Valtiel one where if you look around, you can see like one of the heads looks really good and then one of the other heads looks insanely terrible. It's because someone had to resculpt it in the secondhand market. And then that somewhere around the line started getting recasted in those generations, and it kind of branched off into its own thing. That's one thing I don't like, but also the other thing is that a lot of these, I believe, were originally sculpted by the same artist, and even though they got very close to the actual source, they kind of added their own spin to things. So hopefully I don't get in trouble for this, but the original Slurpers here, their front hands, it was just like a potato sack that was like sewn to their skin. You can even see so in the original concept art and the actual in-game models. But unless I am mistaken, yeah, I can kind of see where he got his idea from. But if you look really close at the hands, they kind of look like something else, as if it was to be like symbolic, but you know, with all the extra veins and but in the original concept art, a lot of that is kind of there, but they're also kind of blurred out a little bit. But when you go to the actual in-game model, somewhere along the lines they changed that and turned it into just sacks, like potato sacks. It has the same potato sack texture and everything as his shirt. That could have been a detail thing that they might have done, you know, or, you know, actually I don't think it really would have mattered anyway, just because you're still baking the same texture onto it. Maybe they couldn't get that much detail into it and they decided to change it. Maybe it didn't look good from a gameplay perspective, and they needed something to blend in with the floor better, so they went with more of the burlap sack texture. Either way, I prefer the in-game version over this one. Thankfully, when it is going to be done, it will be laying down and you won't notice it too much. And I mean, kind of, but I don't know. But yeah, that's why I don't have all of them. There's also a ton that how to put this? There's also a ton that you just can't find. When these things were originally sold, I think I said this in the first video. They were only sold in a range of a couple hundred, and they were sold for a lot. But what I didn't mention was, because I completely forgot this, they mostly stayed in circulation in Japan. So these were all made mostly by a sculptor in Japan. I guess the whole resin kit thing is like, or at least was, a really big hobby over there. So a lot of these would end up over there or stay over there, I guess. And it would only circulate in the secondhand market there until recasters got their hands on them. Then they started circulating across the world. Aside from all that, I don't have any crazy complaints or worries. I have watched the trailer a million times though, so I figured I'll run through some things that I noticed. The scene opening with a cockroach around a bunch of cigarette butts. Considering the time this game takes place, everyone smoked back then. So this is kind of a cool detail to see. When James opens the bathroom door, the parking lot is pretty spot on. There might be a few minor details changed, like the light pole and fire hydrant removed a little bit on the sidewalk, but that's not a huge issue. You can see at the far end the white van is there. The welcome sign is still missing its letters to say "We Come." I do wonder if the mileage sign above that will still be kind of weird though. When James walks by the map, it looks really close to the original. It looks like someone on Reddit already made this comparison image, You can see that there are some changes. The shoreline's a little different, and so is the park layout. Most buildings seem close to what they should be. Some spots might just be more thorough than the original, or maybe they're changing things a little bit to make the routes more visually interesting. I'm okay with that though. Silent Hill 2's game path was already pretty linear, despite the map giving the impression otherwise. So if they're able to make things look nicer as we walk down our set path, that's fine. There also seems to be some photos on the side of the map, most likely notable places in the town or places we'll visit. I can make out Brookhaven Hospital in the middle, but I don't recognize any of the other ones. We see the inside of one of the cafes, hopefully meaning we can enter some more buildings. We see the outside of what looks like the Woodside Apartments. You can tell by the fence in front. It's hard to say though, I think that only had 3 floors, and this has 4. I'm also noticing a lot of falling leaves in this trailer too. The game might be taking place during the fall, which is a typical foggy time of the year up here, between fall and spring. It looks like a lot of these interiors are being heavily redesigned. Not only is the Pyramid Head room different, but when you see James striking a nurse, it looks like no hallway I'm familiar with, which is another thing I noticed. These buildings now have power. In the original, these rooms were pitch black, and only our flashlight provided light. Kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about showing too much. Let's just hope that this is just for the sake of the trailer. This shot of James falling to his knees, originally I thought this was the double Pyramid Head scene, because this is the only time in the game where this really happens. But this area, when you pause it, it looks nothing like that room. Granted, that room is just a square, and when I compare the two, I can see some similarities in color, but it's missing the carpet. If you run the shot slow enough, you can see the floor is just metal, which I hope they don't change these designs too much, because in that scene in particular, it's more or less taken place in the hotel, and that carpet is hotel carpet. But from what we're seeing in the trailer, it looks almost like, I don't want to think it, but a lot of the Otherworld in the trailer we're seeing looks like the movie's Otherworld. And I don't like that at all. If you freeze the very last frame of the Maria shot, you can see her clothes are different this time around, which does make sense. Maria's original outfit was based on a Christina Aguilera outfit from the late 90s to early 2000s, when women's fashion was more about low-rise pants and showing off the midriff. If this is supposed to take place around the 80s, I believe, it makes more sense for her fashion to be closer to what it was back then. Her skirt's longer, and you can see she seems to be wearing a jacket that goes down to her waist. And that seems pretty fitting considering the fall season that they're showing in this game. The final shot of Pyramid Head has it downpouring outside. This is clearly the rooftop of Brookhaven Hospital. James encounters him in the game when going up there and reading a note from a patient. James heads back to the stairs when we hear him dragging his knife, and he knocks James off the roof where he falls down onto the roof of the floor below, busting through the ceiling and gaining access to a previously locked area. It's a progression scene. But why Pyramid Head is entering the stairway afterwards, I don't know. I'm really hoping they're not going to try and pull a Resident Evil and have him be a continuous stalker throughout the rest of the game. That's a Resident Evil thing, not a Silent Hill thing. Also, considering how heavy it's raining there, we clearly won't be reading any papers up there unless it starts after he reads the paper. That said, this change in weather could be cool. To me, it signifies one of two things. One, maybe this is how we will further obscure the player's vision during the nighttime exploration. Or two, this is them doubling down on the theme of water in this game for James. I just hope they don't use the rain as an explanation for why everything is wet, rather than it being the town symbolizing the other world for James. Yeah, so not a full-on rant video like the last one. Hopefully this was a lot shorter. No major real gripes this time around, mostly just mild concerns, and worst case scenario. Okay, so I just got off of work, so I'm sorry if I look kind of dirty. I don't think I do. But yeah, so I just was halfway through editing all of this stuff, and I didn't think that a trailer was going to pop up out of nowhere, and it did. So I might have to talk about it a little bit. I also apologize. I'm down here repairing some stuff too. This is my data interrogator from Warhammer 40k Darktide. I made this about like a week after the game came out. So yeah, when I originally finished this all off, I kind of left with some, cautious optimism. And this trailer, this gameplay trailer, combat trailer, really took that away. It pretty much confirmed all of my random doubts that I had. There we go, now fixed. Alright, so figure we'll do a quick little rundown on this thing. I'll just watch it real quick, and I'll run through some of the stuff that I noticed, just like on the previous video that they released for the game. I've already watched it like 20 times. I made a couple notes, but I'll more or less just kind of wing it, I guess. It's not all entirely bad. They bring up a lot of scenes that obviously were in the game before, so that's good. Looks like they went the smart route this time and put a blanket over the James on the chair. As far as that thing goes, pretty sure they went this route for obvious reasons. In the game, the body in this chair in front of the TV is James. Whether or not that was intentional, I don't know. It could have just been them asset saving, because they also used James' body in the streets at one point for an item. So to leave that whole thing ambiguous in a much higher detail thing where you can probably see things a little clearer, makes a lot more sense to kind of put a blanket or something over the character's head. They don't show the character close enough or far enough, I guess. The camera's too close to see, but we don't know if this person's wearing the same clothes or not as James. There's a frame of 3 death head moths. I'm going to assume this is in that moth room where I believe you gotta put your hand in that hole in the wall. The old classic juice box down the garbage chute, which a lot of people said that they were surprised that they kept that in. I don't see why not. I mean, if anything, maybe they'll improve upon it, because in the original they don't really tell you what the juice box is for, or that, I mean, it makes sense when you look at your inventory for this random thing you picked up, but in context of the game, it doesn't make sense, or in the story, I guess, it doesn't make sense why James would pick up this random juice box and then just, you know what I mean? It makes sense you need something heavy, but most of the time in these kind of games, you tend to pick up the key item before the actual puzzle. I guess they could probably just change the order of operation, so it's now you see it and James is like, I need something heavy to dislodge that. As for why he wants to dislodge it, because in the game it's just a large garbage bag, but I don't know. Okay, what else are we seeing? There's the safe. I'm trying to remember, I believe this is the safe when you immediately go in the other hotel building, or the other apartment building. I think it's in that very first room, or very first apartment, when you cross from window to window, or door to door. I do not remember off the top of my head where you got this key code from, but I believe it was just a random chest with just some ammunition, maybe some health potions. Alright, so this is obviously the body in the refrigerator for Eddie. The positioning's different. In the original, it was in the middle of the kitchen. This time, it looks like the refrigerator is still stationed in its cabinet space. Can I make out anything else around him? Looks like the fridge is full of guts. Why? I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll explore a little bit more of Eddie's stuff, but why guts? I mean, let's just hope they don't go that route of like cheap Western horror that the last few Silent Hill games have kind of really failed at. Oh, we had something flash there. Hold on. It might just be a screen burn. Wait, no, there is something there. No, so there's random flashes of something. It might be kind of like an end of a film reel kind of thing, where there's like you can pick up the writing that's actually on the film frames. That's kind of what this looks like. Because I saw like an S, I think that looks like an H. And there's a bunch of letters in the very last frame. Not important, I'm just over analyzing. Then we got our classic scene of James jumping from apartment building to apartment building. They're letting you see down to the bottom, which I guess is fine, but I swear it looked like it was farther down in the original game. Let's see, the infamous clock puzzle. The walls look nicer than this than the last one, because in the original trailer you saw the scene where he's in the apartment building and there's Pyramid Head. The wall textures on that looked really, really bad. This one here with like the peeling off wallpaper looks a lot better. Hopefully that's a graphical improvement from before, hopefully. So I was right about it being the apartment buildings. It looks like there's just an opening now in the fence, so what the purpose of the fence even is, I don't know. Huh. Okay, so this is something I'm noticing right off the bat. So it looks like maybe they are doing the head tilt navigation thing again. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you know at least a little bit about the Silent Hill series, and the way things tend to always work is wherever your character looks at, there's an interactable item, be it a pickup item, quest item, something interactive, you name it. Instead of it being marked, your character will just look at it. And if they look at something, you can go investigate. He's looking at something right before he goes into the building. It looks like he might be looking at the papers on the light pole, which looks like missing persons ads or help wanted ads or something like that. Yeah, because he's definitely looking in that direction. And then as they walk too far past, then his focus goes back towards the building. Alright, and then this is probably the first nitpick I've seen people point out. I am kind of on the fence with it too, and it's with the fog. Something about this just seems wrong. Maybe it's because I live in the Northeast and I know what fog looks like. That's not fog. That's definitely something else. Now, in Silent Hill 2, the fog has a weird texture to it where it's almost like smoke. So it can be debated one way or the other. Is it actually smog? Hi, Sable. Is it actually fog? Is it something else? You know, is it smog or is it smoke? Silent Hill 1, it was snow, so it might not actually be fog, it could be something else. But at the same time, Angela in the game mentions about the fog, and that's their whole conversation to start with at the beginning of the game, so I'd assume it's fog, or at least looks like fog. But yeah, it's also a very dark color too, like it's a dark gray, and fog's always white. And then we get to see my very first gripe is the interior redesign. I think I mentioned it earlier, but there's lighting in here, in-building lighting, which means there is still power in this whole town. I don't know why they're going with this approach. In the original game, almost nothing had power, and everything was just pitch black, and it was only lit up by your flashlight. And that was great for the horror of it because you could only see what your flashlight would light up. With all this natural lighting, I understand they probably want to show off everything better, but I assure you, if you get the lighting on that flashlight just right, it'll look way better just from the flashlight. I'm not even, like, I think this is a bad direction to go with all the natural lighting. It almost ruins the whole point of having a flashlight, which you can see both in the original trailer and this gameplay trailer. All this natural lighting, you see everything. And this is going to keep leading into my fears about this becoming an action game with everything else I had said before, the third-person camera, the redesigns of the levels, everything becoming bigger to accommodate for that third-person camera. And that's going to change the gameplay because now you have more room to move around, which also means you have to make things even bigger for that. So now we have a very combat-centric game, big open spaces, well-lit areas, we're kind of moving away from survival horror and more moving in towards the realm of action, which is what everybody seems to be complaining about right now if you just keep watching. Because this game is insanely combat heavy now. Everything is just... I feel like the camera is just way too close. Like, the whole idea of being immersed, like, they said we want to have a third-person camera because it's more immersive. Do they not play video games, or do they only just make video games? I swear this is like a thing now where they don't play games at all other than what they're developing. Like, the only thing I'm being immersed in is James's shoulder. Like, that's it. I can't see anything else. I can't, like, I didn't even realize where these lying figures were after like the 5 times that I watched it, until I saw someone in a comment saying, oh, well, it's cool they brought the swimming pool back. And I was like, is it? And I was like, I used to look in the background, it's like, oh, maybe it is. Because you can't see anything. And when we do finally look at these monsters, my whole fear about the insanely clean textures on these comes full into play right here. And we got the on-screen prompts. It looks like a generic on-screen prompt too. Why are they showing us this? So for now we have a very action-oriented game, over-the-shoulder cameras, wide open areas, on-screen prompts, QTEs, grappling. We're not even getting done yet, because I believe next are the nurses. Yeah, let's talk about those nurses next. So right off the bat, apparently more monsters means more scary, because we got ourselves a shot of, what is this, like 3 or 4 nurses all coming in the room together, just walking out of the room. It's a shooting gallery. Just unload all your bullets. It's a shooting game now. Alright, so before I start talking about the nurses, we're still in the subject of combat, as I'm rambling all over the place. In this combat trailer, I do believe their purpose was to show us certain things. For example, one thing they do show us is that the enemies react differently to different impacts. So for example, you have this lying figure getting shot in the leg, and it kneels down on that leg. Okay, that's pretty cool. The stomp looks terrible, by the way. There's like this artificial camera shake. Don't think that's really needed. Tone that down or take it out entirely. Looks like they shot the mannequin in one of the legs, and the legs flinches back, shoots nurse in the head, her head reacts. Pretty neat hit detection, which is kind of standard fare for really any shooter these days, so why we're getting this as something to show off, I don't know. Then comes my biggest gripe. Now we see a nurse vaulting over a mid-high section divider. Why that divider is even there, I don't know. Let's zoom and enhance, see if I can even make out what kind of room this is. Is she going through a window, maybe? Maybe it looks like I see like glass spewing from the side, so maybe it's a window. But the whole vaulting nurse bullshit, like, okay, so in Silent Hill 2, a lot of these monsters are like, how do I describe it? I don't want to say zombies because that's not the right term, but it's very close to what I want to use. So the town's manifesting these creatures for James. They're not like sentient creatures-ish, kind of. The lying figures act a lot and sound a lot like cockroaches. They crawl around the floor, they shamble around. The nurses, same thing. A lot of shambling, a lot of standing still. Not a lot of thought going on upstairs. But these monsters, the nurses especially, are like very smart in terms of navigation and combat. That's not what these monsters are supposed to be. They're supposed to be like just a manifestation of a monster creature that's just summoned. It's not fully sentient. There's only one sentient monster in this game, and that's Maria. And there's a stark contrast between those two because they don't want you to know that she is a monster. Not until, the story starts to progress. Because that's kind of the main focus of this game, the story. It's a slow burn story. It's a slow... they're making this whole thing... I understand it's a combat trailer for them to show you how the combat works, so that's going to be kind of the front and center point of what they're showing here. But what they're showing us is that these monsters are way more into the combat. They're going to be smarter and stronger opponents for you to fight in your dueling battles in the open arenas of Brookhaven Hospital. You know, like, what is this? But yeah, I think it's just way too focused on combat. I know it's a combat trailer. I think the camera is way too close. I'm looking more at James's shoulder than anything else. It would be nice that you only go into that kind of a stance when you are in a fight position, maybe. But again, like I said before, you go into these tight, cramped areas. That just makes it even tighter. It looks almost like it's trying to get closer into him on his shoulder, which means you can't see anything but him. That creates more frustration than actual like suspense or anything like that. Especially considering all the levels are now insanely well lit, and there's no need for a flashlight really. What the hell's the point? Again, why the hell is the entire environment lit up? Why is there power in this town? Are we gonna have to go to the town generator to turn all the lights back on? Oh, jeez, wasn't there? There was a level like that in Homecoming too. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Let's try and step away from the combat, because I know it's a combat trailer. They're just trying to show off the combat, and it's a bad approach. They shouldn't have had this trailer. It's just sending off the wrong vibes when all they're really trying to show us is the combat, but it's making everything, it's making that combat stand out way more than it should, and the combat is not doing it any favors. So who knows. Let's see, we are walking up some steps on the side of a building. This looks like some extra exploration that I don't think we were able to do beforehand. So that's cool. No idea where this is at. Of course, there's a giant street. Giant light up. I wonder. I don't think so. I highly doubt this is the final staircase at the end in the hotel before you fight Maria. But considering how far apart the other walkway is on that side and how unbelievably high that light is up top, gives me the sense of this room is insanely big, and there's a lot of walkways. That's the only thing I'm seeing. So that's the impression I'm getting. Oh, I know what that room is. That looks like... No, because that doesn't make sense either. Because that's a double door open, but if you pause it before it cuts, the angle of that floor and the layout of that room is the first Pyramid Head fight. Why are we dealing with a double door now? That was an exit door for the apartments. I mean, at the very least, if that is what that is, they're at least keeping it very true to that scene. As simple as those rooms are, since we are dealing with like a more abstract reality, especially in certain scenes here and there, these boxy rooms are actually kind of fine. You just need to detail them up, populate them with a few more small details here and there, and you're good. Is that okay? There's like a body in a bathtub. I can't tell if it's a mannequin or just a regular body. Let's cross our fingers it's a mannequin, and we just don't have random dead bodies falling out of the ceiling like Homecoming. Reap what you sow. How many things were written on the wall in Silent Hill 2? There was a hole here. It's gone now. If you really want to see Mary, there one. Basically, it's the two ones in Neely's bar. Yeah, I think that might be it. This whole writing crap on the walls thing has become like a huge staple in games all of a sudden. I want to say it started around Left 4 Dead, when like all the survivors would write things on the wall, and that's how you got a lot of your visual storytelling. It's effective in a game like that where you don't have any story. I get it. I'm assuming it's directed towards James. Okay, but how many of these are we gonna have? Like one in every level? Who's going around writing them all now? Is it we can explain that away? His Pyramid Head said Laura, she's gonna run around with a bucket of paint. I mean, I never really cared who actually wrote the message in Neely's bar, but hey, maybe we can explain that too. Let's see, what is this? That Looks like a watery floor, so this is definitely the labyrinth where we're shooting this flying figure. It looks like, okay, so we're seeing some kind of various levels of monster design, which is cool. You saw it in the original games too. Different levels, they have the same monster, but there's a slight variation in different areas. But they all seem to have these flakes of things on them. I don't know if it's glass or paper or bandages. People have been mentioning some janky animation. The shot here of James shooting this one mannequin, if you watch its feet don't track the floor properly. Its foot like moves half a step early, and then he shoots it, and then the whole thing just slides forward like half a step. I don't know if it's trying to like make it to its animation point. That's just definitely weird. Let's see. James is grappling with another flying figure with an on-screen prop. Someone tell me how you grapple with something with no arms. At the very least, Silent Hill Origins got the idea that, okay, if you're going to grapple with this thing with no arms, it's going to get you with its legs. This thing is just leaning on him, and he's like, oh my god, That's our combat pro here against the war veteran nurses. All right, and then we're back to the shot of James jumping from door to door, building to building in the apartment complex. Why is this so bright? It's literally so bright that you can just see that the walls are flat textures. The textures in Silent Hill 2 looked better than this. Especially the dirt that just hangs down. Like it literally just, it's a wall sprite on the wall. I don't see any bit mapping. I don't see any kind of reflections. Do we still do tessellation these days, or have we moved past that? I don't even see that. This entire section looks like someone made it in like 30 minutes. Not even. I know that because I used to dabble in this stuff back in the day. Don't get me started on that and how Valve doesn't care about Left 4 Dead 1 and them leaving the SDK for it broken for, like 3 years. You know, miraculously, once Left 4 Dead 2's SDK all of a sudden comes out, Left 4 Dead 1's SDK all of a sudden crashes, and no one can develop anything for it for like 3 years. And they're like, oh, we're aware of the issue. Sean, stop ranting. That used to be a hobby of mine. A couple more montages we can keep talking about here. Let's see, turning a pipe. I'm not entirely sure where this would be. I know there's one pipe you turn in the labyrinth. I think that has like a pair of handcuffs on it you have to unhook, but this doesn't look like that, so they might be kind of redoing that. At the same time, this wall textures just keep screaming Silent Hill Homecoming to me and Silent Hill movie. I hate that whole aesthetic. It might just be me, but I hate the aesthetic of the movie that you see then ripped in everything else. The Silent Hill movie, Silent Hill Homecoming, they have a unique aesthetic that is more Nightmare on Elm Street than it is Silent Hill. But visually, aesthetically, the boiler room stuff, it's a cool look, but it's not Silent Hill. Christoph Gans's movie is like a weird-ass middle ground between the two. They took elements of the two because he is completely incapable of pulling from source material. He has to pull from literally everything else but I already went on a 2-hour rant about him. I'm not doing that again. Let's see, we're going into, that looks like the Eddie room. There's a real quick shot of him opening up a door into a bathroom. It looks like, I'm going to say that's him meeting Eddie for the first time. Him holding up a knife. It looks like Angela's knife. Let's see. Is there anything else? Now, as far as I had said before about how unclean a lot of these monsters are, or about how clean these monsters are, and in the original game, you had a lot of these like really high contrast textures and like these baked in splotches that kind of like really sell that contrast of these creatures when you see them on the other end of a hallway only lit up by a flashlight. It makes them harder to see what you're seeing. It only brings out certain details, and it kind of like helps sell that uncanny image of these characters. You do kind of get that once in one of these shots when James is shooting one of these nurses. It could just be mud or blood on her, but she does have a lot of these like long black oily things hanging from her, which I like, which does get me hoping. I'd have to go back and double check, but I hope the blood's black in this. Black blood in Silent Hill looks way better, in my personal opinion, than red. Considering the high contrasts, the dark lighting, and things only be illuminated by the flashlight, it makes for a much more striking image than color. But yeah, only this one nurse. This one, aces. Make them all look like that, please. This one looks good. This one, like, this is what I want right here. This one nurse, that's what I want. Whoever did this, give them a raise, fire everybody else, have them do the rest. Make them go back and do the rest. This nurse looks good, like A freaking plus. The more I look at it, the more I like it. I'm not even kidding. No, it's red blood. It's red blood. Now, I'm gonna cross my fingers because I do believe in the game, in the original games, you could choose different blood color options. I believe maybe it might have been like a censorship thing or something where you could, and they just left it as an option for other people. I believe there was black blood, red blood, and green blood. I always chose black, so that's a personal thing for me. It looks better. It looks so much better. If I can toggle that, I'm gonna be happy. Bloober Team, if you're watching this, and I know you're not, black blood, make it an option, please. Black. Yeah, even the mannequin is side strafing. Why is this creature smart? It's side strafing and trying to dodge bullets. Oh my god. There's a reason everybody hates Silent Hill Homecoming's combat. Okay, this isn't a Silent Hill Homecoming rant, but can I dive into this for a minute? Okay, so Silent Hill Homecoming could have been an amazing game if they just ignored Konami and said, you know what? Backtrack. Even if they stayed with all of Konami's bullshit and was like, they wanted the story of Silent Hill 2 and then the visuals and monsters of the Silent Hill movie. Best of two completely different audiences. Try and bring them together, try and make them both happy. Obviously that would not work, but if you really, really wanted to and had a team that was actually half fucking capable, you could. There's an entire story arc to Alex Shepard that could have been good. They explained away the combat in that game because they're like, oh, well, he's a war vet. But in the end, you find out that he never went to war. So you have the entire concept of stolen valor. They could have dived deep into that. All of his symbolism, everything could have been all about stolen valor. Him wearing his dad's army coat. Maybe he goes out and tries to, pick up women with being like, yeah, no, Mom, I was in the military. I served. And then they ask him what, and he just makes crap up. You could dive into that. You could go deep into that. Oh, but they didn't. Instead, it was like, oh, I accidentally pushed my brother out of a boat, and I forgot, so I made up a story about me going to the war, and now my dad's putting me in the hospital, or they're gonna sacrifice me to the town for. Okay, let's just stop there. This Homecoming is so fucking stupid. Alright, so I'm running out of stuff to complain about here. Long story short, I don't think the combat on this is that bad. It just needs reworked. Probably the same things you heard from everyone else. Animation needs seriously tweaked. Pull that camera out, okay? Why is the camera in so tight on combat? If anything, that's the time you want to pull the camera away. You want to get it out so you can see what you're doing. Half these shots, the only thing I'm looking at is his shoulder. That's all I'm seeing. How can I navigate an area? How can I dodge? If you want to go the route of making the game combat heavy, why are you making it so hard for me to know what I'm doing? If I can't see the environment, if I can't see my enemies, if all I see is James's shoulder, your camera's in way too tight. Pull that camera out. And then on top of that, my only other gripe is that these environments are way too lit. I don't see the point of James having a flashlight at all. Silent Hill 2, 3, and I want to say 1, but I'm not 100% sure, had this really unique feature that you could not read maps unless you had your flashlight or you were within a well-lit area. Most of the time, if you were outside or by a window, it's like, okay, I can read my map. No source of light, no reading maps. It became less of an issue once you got your flashlight, but if you turn your flashlight off and try to read in the dark, it'd say, I can't read this. Now that I think about it, I do wonder, was there light in the game? I want to say there maybe was like one exit light that was on, like something that requires emergency backup lighting. That might have been it. If you made it this long into the video, let me know if I'm right or wrong on that. Alright, so then last but not least, we have this final shot of James opening up a door into a room with a bunch of stuff. Alright, so there's... Alright, so we have Pyramid Head dragging a lying figure or a mannequin, hard to tell. It's very blurry because it's out of focus. It's in the background. In a very similar pose to a certain Pyramid Head reveal in the Silent Hill movie. If we start doing a lot of these parallels to this fucking movie, I'm gonna blow my top. The only thing I can think of is if they're doing something like this to coincide with Christoph Gans's release. Oh, please don't let me just... Oh, I hope not. I really hope not. That's not something they're doing. I don't think they would do something that stupid, where they would try and make it visually similar to his movie, especially considering his movie has been done filming like 9 months ago, and we haven't seen a screenshot or anything. I hope that film never sees the light of day. Yeah, what's up? What's up with this posture too? Looks almost like it looks like Pyramid Head's doing the Harlem Shake. I'm not even kidding. What is with that pose? Alright, I'll stop there before. Do I think people are overreacting to this combat trailer? No. I was going to say yes, and I was like, oh, well, maybe Bloober Team is listening, and maybe they'll make some adjustments, but they're not going to. No. They're going to do what Konami wants, and what whoever is in charge over there wants, and that's what they want. For some unknown reason, they want to take a game that was a slow burn, story-driven game, and turn it into a action shooter combat arena style thing. Every room has been made bigger, all the hallways have been made wider. There's a strong emphasis on combat. The enemies are all about dodging and strafing and jumping over mid-high section pieces, which I hope that doesn't mean we're going to have cover shooting too. Oh, jeez. I saw some people in the comments of some of these videos worrying about the on-screen prompts. They're like, oh, geez. It's like, please get rid of that on-screen prompt. It looks terrible. I'm not going to be surprised if we don't have like an opening tutorial thing, on-screen notifications, navigation waypoints, something to constantly tell you this is the direction to go, follow the dot, because modern game design doesn't think gamers are smart enough to figure things out for themselves. You'd have to follow the dot. I mean, sometimes I kind of blame myself for not playing games as much as I used to, and then I realize that anytime I go to play something semi-modern, everything has rubber bumpers on it, and it has to hold your hand through everything. Like, there's almost zero trust anymore, unless it's like a Soulsborne game, and then those games are just torture to begin with. You have this like insanely striking contrast between games that want to just hold your hand and treat you like a daycare, and then ones that are just like, I'm gonna make this the hardest thing ever. There's nothing in the middle. Silent Hill was one of those games that was kind of in the middle. For better or for worse, that's what it was. But I'm rambling, so let's go back to where I was before this thing came out. And worst case scenario, if the game ever does end up being bad, I still have these. So no harm, no foul. And again, just like last time, since that's done, that means the model's done. So we will end this video with shots of our guy.